Welcome to episode 194 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how's it going today?
I'm all right. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing okay. I'm feeling a little bit better than I was an hour ago.
That's good.
Yeah.
Episode 194. It sounds like we're getting perilously close to episode 200.
We are getting very close to 200. That's just, 6 weeks away now. I don't know what we're going to do because we obviously did a pretty special guest with episode 100 where we had Bjarne come on. I don't know what we should try to do for 200. I don't know. I guess if anyone has any suggestions, let us know. At the top of every episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. This week, we got a tweet from David Poole saying, the C++ committee deprecated code CVT in 2017, leaving C++ with no standard way to handle Unicode. Could you bring in some smart people to talk about our alternatives? And thanks for the podcast. And he linked the paper, which is deprecating code CVT, which I'll be honest with, I was not familiar with this at all. Jason, were you?
I knew that happened, but had completely forgotten. Like, so completely that I actually recently deployed some code that uses code CVT.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it sounds like the reason they're deprecating it is because they thought no one was using it.
Well, I mean, if you needed, without making an operating system call, some way of converting between, 16-bit wide whatever Unicode, like, it was there.
Right. So are you not happy with them for taking this out?
I honestly don't know.
Do you know any
about
alternatives?
No, there's libraries that have been around since the beginning of time, since the beginning of Unicode to handle this kind of thing. What's that really popular one from a really complete one from IBM, I think? Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
I don't. Guy, do you know what we're talking about?
Are you talking about ICU?
Yes, that's one.
That's part of the Unicode consortium, isn't it?
Is it?
Ooh.
Yes, I don't know. I don't have to deal with it often enough, but I was helping move some code away from Qt, which was relying on that, basically. So I used code CVT.
Okay. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. Joining us today, you just heard him, is Guy Davidson. Guy is the principal coding manager of Creative Assembly, makers of the Total War franchise, Alien Isolation, and Halo Wars 2. Guy has been writing games since the early 1980s. He is now a contributor to SG14, the study group devoted to low latency, real-time requirements, and performance and efficiency, especially for games, finance, banking, and simulations, and to SG13, the HMI study group. He speaks at schools, colleges, and universities about programming and likes to help good programmers become better programmers. Guy, welcome back to the show.
Hi, chaps. Good to be back again. I think it's my third visit now, isn't it?
All right.
Yeah, I think we have had you on 2 times before. Yeah.
Ooh.
I like, I'm sorry, just the fact that you said 1980s instead of 80s, Rob, as you read the bio. Just to clarify, Guy is not old enough to have been writing games in the 1880s.
I don't think anyone was writing games in the 1880s.
No, but I did just see someone on Twitter complaining, like someone went up to her and was like, oh, have you heard about this movie? And I forget the name of the movie, so I'm just going to use Mean Girls as an example. Have you heard about this movie, Mean Girls? I think it was made in the 1900s.
Oh, oh no!
Yeah.
That's so last century, isn't it?
Yeah, that's technically true, but no, just don't go there. Just don't. Stop.
Oh. How old was this young person?
I have no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. I'm 51, I remember the 80s, it's like yesterday.
You were born in the 1900s, Guy.
Yeah. Well, in 1967. A delightful vintage.
Okay, well, Guy, we have a couple news articles to go over. Feel free to comment on any of these, and then we'll start talking more about the work you've been doing with the committee lately, okay?
Excellent.
Okay, so first we have this NF HTTP library. It's a cross-platform C++ HTTP library that interfaces natively to other platforms and it's on Spotify's GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've really seen a whole lot of open source work come out of Spotify, so this is interesting.
Yeah,
this
nothing jumped
this
out
was
at me.
for me. I didn't realize Spotify had a GitHub. In fact, I'm there. I have it on my laptop right now. I'm going to see if they have other things as well. A couple of things. Folsom, Skio, Styx, Heroic, Luigi. Oh, okay. They're quite busy people.
Yeah.
But yeah, this NFHTTP thing, I quite like the look of. I'm not sure it's going to replace the networking TS, but it looks pretty useful. And, we love portability.
Right. So it looks like what they're trying to do is leverage the platform APIs of like iOS or Android or Windows as opposed to using something that's written in, a cross-platform language natively, like like a curl or OpenSSL. Is that right?
Something curl something. Yes, curl used on Linux and Android, and Windows obviously going to the native. Linux and Android are Unix flavors anyway, aren't they? And iOS and OS X and Windows have additional, proprietary muscle behind them, so they're going through native native libraries, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
I noticed that the Linux and iOS ones are stable, whereas the Android and Windows are less stable. I do hope that they're making great claims about it being portable and efficient. I do hope that those claims do hold out when Android and Windows are stable as well.
Right.
Right.
One cost of stability can be performance, obviously. Portability, performance, stability. Choose one.
Next article we have is another one from Vector of Bool, Understanding C++ Modules Part 2, Export, Import, Visible, and Reachable. Jason, did you have a chance to read through this one?
I did not, unfortunately. Sorry.
Okay. Guy,
But-
have you been up on the modules discussion? Are you familiar with all this?
I have been reading this. It's a good article. Actually, the paragraph. I read the earlier one. This is part 2, in fact.
Right.
I read part 1 when it was published. I do like his writing, and he's got to be applauded for, describing a completely new thing, quite so concisely. And modules is a completely new thing. It's a new mechanism of abstraction. It does explode the language quite considerably. I was delighted that we managed to introduce it into the international standard at Kona. Although I do have reservations that we don't have much implementation experience. I hope it will all just work, and I'm sure it will. It will just work.
It'll just work. Yes.
No,
Don't hope. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'm sure these people know what they're doing. This is one of the great joys of writing games. Is if it goes wrong, no one really does get hurt. They might flame the message boards, but it's not medical equipment. It's not an aeroplane. It's not a nuclear reactor. It's just a game. Fine. It's fine.
It is with you that we've discussed that you do have to do things like filter out death threats from your forums and stuff, right?
Oh yes, obviously we have to moderate our forums at all times. We are probably more likely to get the more extreme end of response from users than most software applications.
But it's really just an emotional response, not a plane crashing, as you said.
Not a plane crash, no. And frankly, we can deal with that. And actually, I don't have to deal with that. We have people who do that, who deal with that for us. It's great.
Nice to have people.
It's great. We have an excellent marketing and communications team. I'm very pleased they're on board with us.
Yeah.
Okay. Next thing we have is this Blend 2 high-performance 2D vector graphics engine. It's written in C++ and released under the zlib license, and I definitely wanted to get your take on this, Guy.
Yes. Well, I took a look at this. It's quite lovely. It's another 2D library because, we don't have enough, really.
Mm-hmm.
I've been saying this for ages. We don't have enough 2D libraries. There's always new ways of doing this. I'm very pleased with the JIT compiler and the optimizations and performance benefits that's going to yield. I haven't spoken about it with my co-author yet, but we're scheduled to talk soon. I'm going to be suggesting that this might improve our reference implementation of the IO2D library.
Interesting. Okay. So I have to make a bit of a comment on the examples on this project.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a side-by-side example, if you scroll about halfway down the page, that is the C API versus the C++ API.
Oh,
Right.
well, yes.
It is like literally exactly the same.
It is, isn't it?
Um,
I thought you might have something to say about that.
I started, it says that there are wrappers around these things that provide RAII and act as a smart object.
Mm.
But they actually demonstrate multi-phase construction. They create a thing on the stack and then call the create member function, and then you have to check a return value. That's not RAII, right? Like
Right.
No, it's
an
not.
object has to be constructed fully, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But more to the point, I could be wrong, but I think the example is actually incorrect. And I could be wrong, but I started digging into the source code and looking through the API because I really wanted to know what this create member function does. And I could not find an implementation of it. The context object actually does have several different constructors.
Okay.
Right.
But all those constructors are marked no except. So if you call an constructor with an invalid image object and it's unable to create the context object, I don't know if it actually throws an exception, crashes, or if you're supposed to check a return value somewhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. At the moment, I'm just excited by the JIT compiler and,
Yes.
and the optimization. That's what I've read. I haven't looked into the source to the same extent that you have.
Yeah,
sure
it's...
Well, I'm doing that shortly. But I did notice the C API and C++ API examples and thought, this reminds me of my first C++ back in the 80s, late
Yeah.
80s.
I think that...
I applaud them for trying to make a C++ API, even if it does have a few issues, and not just forcing you to use the C style, function calls. I don't know.
Do you know what? I remember when I was first writing C++ and trying to get around the whole idea of suddenly having these objects and being able to have many of these objects, because for ages and ages I was passing my first parameter as being a pointer to a struct and just getting on with things, and it became clear that there was so much more to C++ than this, and actually you can make C APIs so much clearer. You can create much clearer APIs with C++ than you can with, just overloading on its own sets the whole sets the entire language apart. But obviously construction and destruction, and we all love destructors, it's the preeminent feature of C++. And the idea of calling a construct and create, as you say, multi-phase construction, that seems wrong, really.
Yeah. I think that the example might be at least partially incorrect.
Well, I wonder if he's just demonstrating, or she, actually, I don't know who is the author.
I have no idea who's behind this, actually.
Okay. Well, the author, who has not announced pronouns, is possibly demonstrating that there is a C and a C++ API available, and trying to show that it's broadly compatible or easy to switch from one to the other.
Right.
Whether or not that's a valuable thing to demonstrate, I'm not sure.
And also, I just, for my own, self here, I'm kind of brain damaged after a couple of years of trying to teach C++ best practices. It's like impossible for me to look at code and not immediately start to just try to pick apart the code.
Yes. Yeah. I'm the same.
Yeah, I mean,
it's my job,
My wife has built houses. We walk into a building or a house for the first time. I know immediately she's going to see, like, oh, well, look, the trim wasn't finished right there or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, it's whatever you do, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. This last thing we have is on Bartek's coding blog, who we've had on the show a while back, and he's releasing a free ebook, C++ Lambda story. Mm-hmm. And it's a short ebook all about lambdas with, from version C++ 11 to the, changes in the latest C++ 20.
I remember when lambdas were first introduced, and was it Andrei Alexandrescu did a talk about lambdas, and he said there's no one killer application for lambdas, it's just they're incredibly useful in all sorts of situations.
Yeah.
And lambdas have really grown and grown and grown. I remember when suddenly we had generic lambdas and you could stick auto in there, and it was mind-blowing stuff. I love lambdas. They allow for compact code. They localization of thingy. Sorry, focus of attention, locality of reference.
Yeah. And I'm fully on board with the way this was written too, which he says, by the way, is based off of talk that was given at his local meetup.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And also you don't have to register to download. I mean, he wants you to register to download the ebook, but you can also read the ebook on the website. You can go either direction with that for people who care about that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, like if you fully understand everything that a C++20 Lambda can do, you have to understand object lifetime, constructors, templates, periodic templates, concepts. It goes on and on.
Yeah.
No.
Great way to look at the language, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, Guy, I think the last time we had you on, we were talking about the 2D graphics proposal, and it was just after the ISO committee decided they weren't going to vote it into the language. But you're still working on it, is that right?
Yeah, we're still working on it. So at Rappersville, there was a down vote effectively, but I decided that actually I thought it was still interesting. And what happened was I contacted the national body heads and said, well, do you still think it's interesting? Is this something I still want to carry on with? And they said, yeah, keep going. And I was all right, let's keep going. And I wrote a paper for the next meeting, which was in Albuquerque. I was lucky enough to get paper number 1200, so I was able to call it High Noon for the graphics proposal, because it seemed like there was some kind of cosmic law that required I call it that, and restated the arguments, restated the case, and had the backing of many of the national bodies. So Herb decided that the thing to do was to reanimate Study Group 13, which is the HMI group. And
Wait, which group? I'm sorry.
Study Group 13, Human-Machine Interaction, HMI.
Oh,
okay. So now I'm working in SGI 13 and SGI 14, and in SGI 13 we're continuing the development. We'll have another proposal ready, or have another revision ready, hopefully for Cologne, having accepted feedback. And of course the HMI study group isn't just about 2D graphics. We have an audio proposal in the works as well. I'm very keen that we support some standard form of HMI, or that we create some standard form of HMI, even if it's as a separate standard, in the same way that the special maths functions were published as a separate standard. And I'm, keen to see this pushed forward.
Wait, I'm sorry, but the special maths functions were published as a separate standard? I don't think
they
I was
were.
aware of that.
They were introduced into C++17, but they were first published in, I think it was 2012.
Oh.
Yeah, look it up in CppReference.com. You'll find the whole. No, you won't find the whole story. What you'll find is a number of ISO identification numbers where you can find these things.
Okay.
I don't know why it took that route. I imagine someone like Walter Brown would be able to tell you.
How about the linear algebra work? Isn't that kind of being taken out of the original graphics proposal and, trying to be standardized separately?
I know what you're saying. Taken out is probably the wrong word.
No? Okay.
After Rappersville, Bob Stiegel approached me and said, do you know what? We need linear algebra. Would you co-author with me? And I decided that actually one approach to take, one of the big problems with the graphics TS is the sheer size of the thing. It's enormous. It's actually 6 proposals, all bursting to get out of this one giant proposal. And linear algebra has many more applications besides geometry, particularly in machine learning. Linear algebra is used extensively. Frankly, linear algebra is the cornerstone of much of mathematics. And I do find it faintly peculiar that it's 2019 and we still don't have a standard matrix type and a standard, vector type. We do have a standard vector type, but it's not a... Yeah, I know. The name overloading becomes catastrophic. But Bob and I have been working on this. We presented this at Kona. We presented the first edition at Kona, and excitement was palpable. Lots of people saying, "Yep, this is great. This is something we should have." We were very pleased. Now, the TS process is such that you can't publish a TS based on. You can only publish a TS based against an existing standard. So we don't have linear algebra in the standard. It's not going to make C++20, but it's possible to base, to import a paper into a TS and have it work like that. Nonetheless, whatever happens, it's with linear algebra in the language or in the library, then the TS will become a little less bulky, which would make it a little more palatable. But it's not just linear algebra. There's also geometry. So I'm considering adding geometry in as well, because again, geometry has lots of. We use geometry a lot in games, obviously, but at the moment, the only math functions in C++ are analytic ones. We need some geometric ones as well. Just speaking as a mathematician. So I'm looking forward to linear algebra working on, moving on and growing. We've got another revision, preparing to take flight for Cologne in the summer. And I would hope that we might present to the Library Evolution Working Group at Belfast in November.
So, regarding vectors.
Yes.
I think there's a good chance we have people listening right now who know what a C++ vector is. They don't know anything about linear algebra, and they don't understand why you groaned.
Right. Of course. Yes. So there is a mathematical concept, the matrix and the vector. Well, a vector is a tuple of scalars, and it's pronounced tuple, by the way. It's not pronounced tuple or tuple. It's pronounced tuple. I'm just saying.
Okay.
Please, everybody say tuple, or my teeth will start hurting. So a vector is a tuple of scalars, and a matrix is a tuple of vectors. Now,
And is tuple also the same as the C++ one? Are those things, do they compare?
yes, they do compare.
Okay.
Very well. Vector is a bit of an anomaly. I'm not going to, I'm not going to criticize Stepanov. He's he obviously, I'm pretty sure he knows what he's talking about. But the vector class that we have in the standard library at the moment is not really a suitable replacement for the vector concept, shall we say? Ooh, concept.
Yeah. Now you're getting
now
complicated.
we're there. Oh, watch the flames burn. The vector concept that we're attempting to introduce through the linear algebra library, because the important thing about linear algebra is performance. Certainly when, for example, rendering a scene in a game, the amount of matrix manipulation and vector calculations that you throw at a processor is enormous, and really every cycle really does count. You want the best performance you can get. And if you used a vector which pointed to some data on a heap somewhere, it would be catastrophically slow. You could do much better with a local array of data, if you like. So the mechanism behind the linear algebra proposal is that actually you get to customize all these kinds of things. You'd be able to say, well, vectors should be stored like this, and matrices should be stored like this, and these are the operations you should perform. And that customization is the value of the paper. We just have to live with the fact that we've already got the name vector used for another thing that's a bit too removed from the mathematical concept of vector for my liking. And that's not the only one as well. There are words like modulus. You already have modulus in the library, and you have inner product in the standard library. And there was a fourth one which I've forgotten. But it's in the paper. Read the paper, P1385.
And they're all wrong, basically.
Well, I wouldn't say that. But yes.
But yes.
Rank, that's the other one. Rank is wrong as well. But this is a thing that I'm experiencing, is that computer science is full of overloaded terms, or rather C++ is full of overloaded terms.
Overloaded functions at the very least.
Well, overloaded functions certainly. But I'm interviewing a lot of fresh graduates at the moment, and I ask them things like, tell me about the keyword const, and they say, well, a const variable, and I groan, thinking, you mean a const objects, don't you? We don't really have variables in C++. We have objects which may or may not be const qualified, and trying to separate the words out and highlight what global, for example. Global means something in computer science, but global doesn't really mean, it's a bit too mucky in C++ because we have linkage and we have file scope. And you say, oh, well, what does global mean in that context? So yes, it's just another example of word clarification that we need to tidy up and make correct. Which is basically what we do in the committee.
You just mentioned that you're interviewing a bunch of interns, right?
Graduates for an intern position, yes.
Graduates for an intern. Okay. You want to talk about that?
Take
a slight diversion.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about that. At Creative Assembly, we have 12 slots open for one-year intern programs. The idea being that you go in as an intern and then you find full-time employment whilst you're there. It's very rare for someone to join us and then not find their niche. And as I say, the interview process is proving pretty interesting. Let's talk about study groups. We've got study group 20, which is about education. This was convened recently. And what I'm finding is that the graduates I'm interviewing have wildly varying levels of ability when it comes to C++. And also, almost all of them, some glaring holes in their knowledge. We know, because we've been using C++ for some time, we know all the words, we know all the particular meanings of words and the terms of art, if you like. Mm-hmm. But teaching this is actually really hard. And I was looking through some of my favourite books, like Scott Meyer's Effective C++ books and Herb Sutter's Coding Standards books and things like that. And I was thinking, all of these are, they're not beginners' texts, they're intermediate texts. And actually, good beginners, starters texts are really hard to come by. They tend to be very simple and don't really introduce the important words. I think that's a problem that needs solving. Somebody out there must be able to write a decent book. I probably will in 5 years' time, in my bountiful spare time, I'm sure.
Okay, so I'm just curious, are most of these students coming from the same university system, or are they from all over the place?
They're from Europe. We're still able to get people in from Europe, despite everything that's going on in the UK at the moment.
Right, the
Please
oncoming Brexit.
Yes, the light at the end of the tunnel is the light of an oncoming train, frankly. We do have Europeans applying, but mainly they're coming from the UK. There are some great institutions turning up. For example, I think I've offered positions to 4 candidates. Three of them came from Newcastle University.
Okay.
Which is a bit of a shocker. I went to actually speak at Newcastle University a couple of weeks ago, and I opened the door and suddenly saw 3 of my candidates, which was a bit stunning. The chap who runs the course is an amazing fellow. He has a ZX Spectrum and a ZX81 in his office, so he's all right by me. So he's obviously, he's delivering exactly the course that I would probably deliver. But yes, all of these people they're mainly coming from the UK Institute, but there's no syllabus. There's no C++ syllabus. Right. I think we as a community, we in the C++ community, we need to solve that sooner rather than later. Because I don't know about you, but recruiting is it's impossible. There are lots and lots of people who know a bit of C++ and are not quite dangerous on somebody else's code base. But, you want to do better than that.
It's been a long time since I've interviewed anyone for a job, but when I did, I decided some basic knowledge was hard to come by even then. Rob, are you...
I haven't been doing interviews for a while either.
Yeah.
That's
unfortunate.
It's a fascinating, thing to do, although it's becoming slightly dispiriting. So wave people through, I'll say, all right, tell me about the virtual keyword. And that's the end of the interview. Thank you.
Well, but you did find the candidates you were looking for?
Nope. I found a few. There are several positions still open. I think there's still 8 positions open.
So should people listening to this reach out to you if they're interested?
Absolutely. I thought you'd never ask. Yes, they should. They should go to creativeassembly.com, which is obviously our website. There's a jobs slot on there. I've been tweeting about it as well.
I haven't seen that, sorry.
Well, I started tweeting a few weeks ago. I started tweeting interview tips, things like, bedrooms are second only to bathrooms as poor places to have an interview.
What?
You know, well, so the process starts with a Skype interview. Actually, no, the process starts with a HackerRank test, and then there's a Skype interview, and it's a video interview. It's to make sure that you haven't got a friend lip syncing your answers for you or something like that, which has happened.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome. Art for inventiveness. But what did you think was going to happen when you were let loose on the code base? We saw you straight away at the first review. No, the first thing that happens is a Skype interview, and I would expect people to do a Skype interview in a reasonably neutral private space, not in front of your bed with the dog, with your dog behind you, panting away, or your girlfriend doing her homework, or whatever. But as I say, probably the only worst place in that would be a bathroom. Fortunately, I haven't had any bathroom interviews yet, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time.
I think the worst I've done is a CppCast episode in a kitchen. Because it was the only space that I could find in that particular location that was in New Zealand and a place we were staying.
Kitchens. Good sounding kitchens, no doubt.
Yes.
Algebra. Yeah.
Just to clarify, you are looking for fresh graduates.
We're looking for fresh graduates who will work on an intern program. You need the right to work in the UK, I'm afraid. We can't offer sponsorship because it's a one-year contract which will eventually become full-time. But unfortunately, that introductory program means you do need the right to work in the UK. So that's European citizens and British people, of course, who are still European citizens for the time being.
Yeah. So let's go back to what you're working on with the ISO committee. So in addition to linear algebra, you're working on an audio proposal?
I am. So in 2017, Guy Somberg gave a talk at CppCon about audio. Guy Somberg is the games audio programmer, really. He's written a couple of books, or he's edited a couple of books of essays on game audio. He's a great guy, and he gave a great talk about audio. And during that talk, he made reference to my paper about why graphics should be standardized. And he said, all the same is true for audio. And so I said, hey, let's do it. Let's make a standard audio proposal. And he went, oh, okay, right, let's do this. And we chugged along. Well, what else am I going to do with my time? Talk to people, for goodness sake. In 2018, we made a start. And then I realized that Timo Doomler would make an excellent collaborator because he's not coming from the game side. He's one of the big audio experts, and he's joined us as well. So the three of us have put this paper together, and we want to standardize the very lowest level set of functionality for recording and playback, and then with the hope that this can be built on top of, because many of the audio companies, of the audio software houses, they're all doing the same thing at the bottom, and then building additional stuff on top of that. And in the same way with the linear algebra, I just want to introduce a matrix and a vector class, and then other people can build succession papers on top of that for their particular domains. In the same way with audio, if we can introduce just playing and recording, and then others can either write succession papers to, play back MIDI or stream files to disk or something like that. But it takes away a lot of the low-level grunt work that's repetitive and boring and tedious and dull and is easy to get wrong.
Right.
That's the mechanism. That's the motivation behind it. We presented it to Lugi, the Library Evolution Working Group Incubator. Yes. Laugh at that. Get it out of your systems. You want to.
I like the names.
Yeah. Library Evolution Working Group Incubator, Lugi, which was chaired by Bryce Adelstein-Lelbach.
I believe we actually have Bryce to blame for that pronunciation.
It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. He's a very jolly fellow.
Yes.
But we presented to Lugi with Bryce, and also with Jeffrey Yaskin and JF Bastian. JF Bastian is the Apple C++ lead. Jeffrey Yaskin is at Google. And they gave just world-class feedback to our API and to our library design. This wasn't really a debate about whether or not it should exist. It was just simply, how should it work? How should the library work? How should the API work? Just that could have been applied anywhere. And I really came to realize, Apple and Google got some good people there, but also just the art of designing a library is much understated, and simple library design is worth 10,000 hours of just good implementation. Just making something easy to use is very hard, but ultimately the best thing And being able to point that out and say, look, this is how this library should work, this is how this API should work, here's where people will go wrong, is an amazingly valuable skill.
Hmm.
So we presented to Lugi, they liked it eventually. Timo defended the paper for about 4 hours. It was quite something to watch.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an amazing effort, an amazing piece of work. I mean, the three of us were all in there, but certainly Timo was in the driving seat. But we're quite optimistic. Timo's produced an OS X implementation of the paper. I'm working on a Windows one at the moment. And obviously we're going to need some Unixy ones. If anyone out there is interested in helping us, then that, of course, that would also be great. This is P1386. So there are two papers, 1385 and 1386. 1385 is linear algebra, 1386 is audio, or it might be the other way around. You know what? One or the other. Check them out. And, if you want to help, we're not going to turn down willing volunteers.
So you are hopeful that this is something that will go somewhere?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. Add it to the HMI study group and then, draft it on. It's a lot less controversial than graphics. Audio has pretty much unchanged for about 20 years now. And everyone's still writing the same stuff. It strikes me as a paradigm candidate for standardization. Dull, it's boring, there's no innovation whatsoever. So, the standard is where libraries go to die. And this is precisely what happens.
Well, that's interesting because, I'm assuming it's all PCM audio, basically, right? So you're not talking about like MIDI or anything else like that.
No MIDI, no FM synthesis, but that could happen. Somebody else could add that as well. The bare minimum is recording a sound wave and playing a sound wave back.
Right.
And that's what can I do on my phone? I can record my voice and I can play my voice back. I don't know. I've got an iPhone. There might be FM synthesis on there. I've never found it. If there is,
I don't believe there would be.
Likely. Yeah.
It does seem unlikely. Although you can still buy the old school FM synthesizer chips in bulk if you want to.
Wow. I'll bear that in mind.
Add an FM API to it.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds like enormous fun. I have to talk to Odin. Odin, I'm sure would be delighted with such fun.
Yeah, it's a thing that exists. Well, this is really an aside at the moment, but I watch a lot of retro computing YouTube channel videos. And you can still buy like retro parallel port FM synthesizer, or MIDI, whatever add-on for your, old school computer or whatever, if you want to be able to do that kind of thing, because finding the original sound cards can be difficult now, and there's a lot of aftermarket things available, basically.
I was going to say I was really into chip tunes. And all of the music from the games of the 80s, it's seared into my memory. I'm not going to forget that. I spent most of the early 80s hanging around arcades.
Well, if you really want to, you can buy a 6 or 8-bit ISA card for your 486 that you can put a Commodore 64 SID chip in it.
Wow.
That's the
thing. Take my
money. Yes, that kind of thing is being produced new today. That adapter card. Yes.
Great. Oh, this sounds like summer holiday fun to me. Maybe I can do a theme tune for CppCast.
We would accept that, I believe. Yes.
Great. Yeah. What other proposals do you still work on? Ring buffer?
Yeah, ring buffer. Now, this is my first proposal. The paper number is 0059. That's how old it is.
Oh, wow.
And I've been trying to...
Is it from the 1900s?
Yeah, no. I think it's from 2015. It's when I first started becoming involved. It's ring buffer's tricky because everybody has their own idea of what a ring buffer is, and so it becomes, oh, no, it should have this. No, it shouldn't have that at all, and people argue about it, and, I've set it aside. But now I've actually got a really strong motivation for introducing the ring buffer because, obviously, it is fundamental to audio playback, is you fill up a buffer, and then whilst it's being played from, you fill up another buffer. So you'd have a ring buffer with 2 items in. One of, or 4 items, perhaps you've got stereo channels or something like that, or maybe 10 items with 12 items for 5-1 sound. Anyway, ring buffers.
7.2.
They're, yeah, oh, pardon? 7.2.
7.2. Yeah.
Oh,
That's a thing.
Is it?
Yes.
So what's the two besides? Oh, is it stereo subwoofers?
Stereo subwoofers, yes.
Directional subwoofers. What's the point of that? I didn't think bass was particularly directional.
I don't know. I just know that 0.2 exists.
All right, then. I'll look into that in my non-C++ time. Yeah, so ring buffer. A ring buffer is something that every audio programmer will have written and got wrong about a dozen times before, going to Stack Overflow and pleading for help.
Sounds exciting.
Well, it's the sort of thing that everyone's done and got wrong and finished. Again, it's where the standards where libraries go to die. There only needs to be a ring buffer. Just write it, stick it in the standard, and nobody else needs to waste hours and hours of their valuable time creating something that's already well established.
Okay, so based on what you said, like these things are solved problems. There's no reason to waste your time on whatever. It's just something I've been thinking about a little bit lately. I've never personally written to like the audio driver. Like I've never done that. But I have done, lots of old school things that I find that the experience, even though it's painful and I waste a lot of time, is not, that experience is valuable. It means something later, right? I might be debugging some other problem and that experience now comes to the forefront of my mind. So
Indeed.
Where is the line between I would totally agree. Like shipping software should use the standard API that everyone is, but where do you encourage or not encourage, and particularly in the context of young students learning programming, to say, you should go back and write something straight to the hardware and understand how that works. And now that you've done it, move on.
That is an excellent question. I'm going to have to think of an answer. I guess it depends who's paying for your time. Frankly, it depends who's paying for your time. If I was running a software company and then somebody said, I'm just going to write a ring buffer, and there was one in the standard waiting for me, I'd have strong words to say to them.
Right.
But if I was their professor, their lecturer on their C++ course, and somebody said, I'm going to write a ring buffer, I go, great, excellent, see how it works. And I think that could be, that would apply everywhere. C++ isn't just all about fun.
Right.
Sometimes C++ is all about, solving problems for money. And, if a problem's been solved and it's a time-consuming solution, then you probably owe it to the person who's paying you to use the solution that's already there and spend your time on the things that haven't been solved yet.
As a manager who is also concerned about the education of your employees, would you ever, this is a hypothetical, right? Because I've never had employees.
All right.
Would you ever say, I'm not saying it's hypothetical that I'd be concerned about my employees. I'm saying you are concerned about your employees.
I am.
You are. Would you ever say, okay, you can spend a day writing that ring buffer so that you understand what goes into it and then stop and go to the standard one that we already have available?
Well, I guess another take on that is the one in the standard sufficient?
Okay.
Is there actually a better solution? For example, we tend not to use the standard containers in game dev because they have additional overhead which makes them unsuitable. For example, exception handling. Exception handling is not something we do in games. What would we do with an exception? We'd simply stop the program and tell people to start the program again. So all the exception handling is, and the furniture that carries with it, isn't really very useful to us. And if you're working on a console, you have a very limited amount of space, and you think, exception handling is not something I've really got time for here. So we don't use containers. So certainly, it's a rite of passage when you start optimizing a game. Is if you're writing your first game engine, and then you start looking at where all the bottlenecks are, and you think, that vector, that's not. I can do better than that. I need to do better than that, and that's what motivates people to re-implement parts of the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, what motivates them is measuring again, measuring a third time, and then optimizing at the 80%. Sorry, optimizing the 20% where the 80% of the code is executed.
Right. Okay.
Is there anything we haven't talked about yet with regards to your work and the Standards Committee?
No, I've been very busy.
Yeah.
I remain busy. There are linear algebra telecoms. In fact, there's one in about 40 minutes. So if people want to join in on linear algebra, look at the SG14 mailing list. We have a monthly linear algebra teleconference on the first Wednesday of every month, immediately prior to the SG14 telecon on the second Wednesday of every month. I don't think I could take on anything more, which probably means I'll be taking on something else shortly.
I'm pretty sure you're going to be playing with SID chips on your PC this summer.
Yeah, but that'll be in my sleep. That'll be in my sleep.
Anything interesting you want to plug with Creative Assembly? I know you're working on another Total War game, right?
Yeah, we are. Total War 3 Kingdoms. Please buy it.
I do have both of the Warhammer games now.
Do you? Well, you look at,
great.
yeah, we're working on a third one as well. That was the third one was announced when the second one was announced, so I can talk about that. I don't know when the ship date is, but we have a third one coming out. It's going to be brilliant. Yeah, Total War continues to go from strength to strength. I'm delighted to work at Creative Assembly, and I think anybody who joins our company is making a good move. So, I'm going to plug the jobs@creativeassembly.com email address and invite people to join our happy throng.
Okay. I think that's all we got for today, right, Jason?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming on the show again, Guy.
It's been excellent fun. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.